Hi there. So let's just say you've finished writing a piece of coursework. Your intention now is to proofread that piece of coursework quickly and then simply submit it and forget about it. Well, this is the worst thing you can do if your intention is to get the best possible marks for your efforts. In this video, I'll explain why it's very easy to throw away precious marks in the proofreading process and give you some advice on how you can proofread much more effectively. If I were to ask you now to go and retrieve a couple of examples of pieces of work that you'd submitted previously for academic credit and then have a look through them, I'm guessing that it wouldn't take you very long to find some fairly glaringly obvious errors in your composition. And upon finding these errors, you might think to yourself, well, how on earth did I miss these very obvious errors when I was proofreading this piece of work? And there's a very simple answer, and it relates to something that psychologists call inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness was very effectively demonstrated in a study by Simons and Chabris back in 1999. In their study, participants were asked to watch a video clip of a number of people playing basketball, and they were given the task to count the number of passes that occurred during the video clip. Now, unbeknownst to the participants, at some point in the clip, an actor dressed in a gorilla suit would come onto the screen, beat their chest, and then walk off the screen as if nothing had happened. Now, the participants' job at the end of the clip was to report how many passes they'd seen occur. But of course, they were then asked the obvious follow-up question, oh, by the way, did you notice anything unusual occur during this video clip? And at this point, you would assume that every one of the participants would have said, well, actually, now you mention it, some idiot dressed as a gorilla came onto the screen, beat their chest, and then walked off. But would you believe up to half of the participants failed to spot the actor in the gorilla suit? At this point, you might be surprised at the percentage of participants who failed to notice the presence of the actor in the gorilla suit in that video of people playing basketball. But there's actually a really simple explanation for this. And that explanation is that what we see and what we attend to tends to be very heavily guided by our expectations. So, the participants in the Simons and Chabris study weren't expecting to see a person in a gorilla suit, so they weren't looking for it. And when the actor in the gorilla suit walked on the screen, they weren't really attending to this event because, well, they weren't expecting it to happen and they weren't looking for it to happen. And that's why a good proportion of them failed to notice that it actually occurred. Now at this point you might be thinking, well, that's a very interesting, if slightly weird study, but what's it got to do with the process of proofreading? Well, the lesson is very simple. When you're proofreading, what you hope to see is what actually appears on the page, i.e. what you've actually written. But if you proofread after you've just finished composing a piece of work, what you're actually seeing is not just what appears on the page, but rather what you expected to appear on the page, what you meant to say rather than what you've actually said. And of course, this inattentional blindness fundamentally undermines the effectiveness with which you can proofread your own work. So the question now is, well, how do you avoid falling foul of inattentional blindness in the process of proofreading your composition? So the key to preventing inattentional blindness from undermining your ability to proofread your own work effectively is to remove your expectations about what should be appearing on the page as much as possible from the process of proofreading. Because it's your expectations about what should appear on the page that are stopping you from seeing what's actually on the page. Removing your own expectations from the process of proofreading your work seems like, at first glance, something that would be completely impossible to do because, well, you fundamentally have to read your own work and you can't really escape from your own expectations about what you meant to say unless you put that work down and come back to it weeks later, which of course isn't always practical when you're preparing coursework. But there's a really simple way around this, and that's just to use the read aloud function in Microsoft Word or whatever word processing package you happen to be using. And the reason this works is because computers don't know what you intended to say. So when you invite them to read your composition out, they're not going to fill in the blanks. Their perception of what appears on the page is not going to be sullied by what you intended to appear on the page. So what will then happen is you will quickly get a much better idea of what a reader is seeing when they are looking at your work, as opposed to what you are seeing as the author of that piece when you're trying to evaluate your own work. So the next time you're proofreading a piece of your own work, why not start by using the read aloud function on your word processor to read your work out to you. This will help avoid your expectations about what should appear on the page, blinding you to what actually appears on the page.